អង្គុយចុះ
President, please be seated. The court is back in session and the floor is given to the International Deputy Court Prosecutor to put questions to this witness. You may now proceed.
Good morning, Mr. President, Your Honours, Counsel, and Mr. Chanman. Good morning. I just have a few questions to follow up from what my colleague has just asked you, just so that we can get what you did during the Khmer Rouge period clear. Let me ask you a couple of questions. The village that you went to school in, Krang Skia, that was about 12 kilometres from the Kampong Chhnang airfield, is that correct?
Answer, yes, that is correct.
And you said to the President earlier that you'd spoken to an investigator once about this case, but did you also speak to an investigator again about 9 months after he came to your house and take him to the airfield and show him a few locations where you witnessed some events? Did you hear that last question?
Witness, I could not hear your question. Witness, I could not hear your question.
After you gave the statement to the investigator at your house about the events at the airfield, did you, some months later, take an investigator to the airfield and show him some places where you saw some events occur at the airfield?
Answer. I took that individual to the airport work site and I told him the events that I saw.
Thank you. And I'll ask you some questions about those events a little bit later. You were about 21 years of age in 1975. Can you tell the court whether you were a member of the Communist Party of Kampuchea?
Answer. I did not know then. What I knew is that I was working in the army. I was not part of the party. I was working in the army.
Thank you. Did you ever get an opportunity to read the statute of the Communist Party of Kampuchea?
Answer, no.
Thank you. You testified that the commander of Division 502 was Comrade Met and his deputy was a person called LeVay. Is that correct?
Answer, yes, that is correct.
You said that Comrade Met assigned you to work at the airfield, but in your statement you said that LeVay did. Were they both together when you were assigned, or who in fact assigned you to the airfield?
Answer. Initially, it was LeVay who told me to bring my group and accompany the Chinese delegation to that airfield. And later, Mate was there, and I was told to take 5 or 6 people to help my work. Mate arrived at the airfield, and I did what I was told by him.
And how many times had you met Comrade Met?
Answer. I would meet him sometimes twice a month or in every 3 months. He was staying quite far away from me, so I rarely saw him sometimes.
And when you would meet Comrade Met, would you have conversations with him?
Answer, yes. I had conversation with him. He told and instructed me to perform the assignment or duties, and he asked me what result did I perform. And he also asked about the rocks there at the airfield, and I was told about, I was instructed the assignment that I had to do.
And what was your rank in the army? What was your position? Were you a corporal, a sergeant? Did you have a position, a rank?
Answer. I was a messenger in the army. I had no rank. I had been in that capacity or in that position until 1979. As I stated, I was the messenger conveying messages to units, and I would do my work as told.
And Comrade Met was the commander of Division 502, the highest position in the division. Is that right?
Answer, yes, that is right.
Did you form a good relationship with Comrade Met by the fact that you spoke to him on a number of occasions?
Answer. The reason that I was close to him is because I met him frequently when I was in the army. He knew me well compared to others, and he assigned me to do many tasks when I was at the airfield.
Thank you. I'll ask you about those tasks in a moment, but can we talk about the Deputy Commander, LeVay, for a moment. Did you worked for LeVay before 1975, I think for about 3 years, you've said, and you've also said that you've worked for LeVay after 1975 at the airfield. Did you have a good relationship with LeVay?
Answer. Before he asked me to perform the duty and task, and later on he was not staying close to my place, so the relationship became not like before, and I rarely met him, but later on, and I was told the duty that I had performed by someone else.
Are you talking about now when you were assigned to operate the radar on Phnom Krang Des Meers mountain near the airfield? Is that what you say? Are you saying that you were away because you were working in that mountain?
Answer. Later on, I was asked to drive a vehicle and bring material and equipment uphill. No one dares to drive the vehicle, so I was told and assigned to be stationed at that mountain for a while.
Thank you. You also mentioned that you were asked to guard the station at Stung Men Chai after the Khmer Rouge took control of Phnom Penh, before you went to the airfield. Can you tell us whether Division 502 had a security office at Stung Men Chai?
Answer. Initially, I was asked to stand guard, and later I was transferred to the airfield, so I did not know who else were there.
Did you ever hear of Division 502 having its own security office, say where people may be arrested and taken there? Did you ever hear of a security office?
Answer. I have no idea about the security office. I did not know about the whereabouts of that security office.
Thank you. You also mentioned that when you went to the airfield that you met a person called Uncle Song. Who is Uncle Song?
I do not recall it.
Can you tell us who the deputy or the subordinate of LeVay was at the airfield?
Answer. There was only chief of office. His name was Jane, I do not know this individual's full name. What I knew is that Ning was the chief of an office under the supervision of LeVay. So this individual would supervise our work, would meet the assignment at that airfield.
If I can just refer you to your statement, this is D166/116, English at 00292824 and 5, Khmer 00287529, and French 0035866. Witness, you were asked this question: who assigned the work, called the meeting and set the plan for the workers at the airport construction site? And you answered, at the beginning, LeVay and Song. When more people were sent from the East Zone, Yang and LeVay were in charge of those tasks. Yang disappeared before the Vietnamese fighting in 1979. Does that statement that you gave refresh your memory as to who Song was?
Answer. Song was from the same village. He was a soldier in the 502 as well. He has passed away. He was a technician at that time. And he was engaged in the training by the Chinese delegation.
Did you just forget his name the first time I asked the question, or did I not pronounce it correctly?
Answer. I recall an individual by the name Song. He was a villager in the village nearby the mine, and he was in the army.
You mentioned that after you did the measurements at the airfield, the first time that you went to Kampong Som to collect some more equipment to send to the airfield and I think Siem Reap. And then you said you returned back to the airfield, and my colleague asked you some questions as to how many people were there after you did the measurement and came back. You said there were many hats when you looked across the airfield. Can you explain that a bit more, please, about how many people were there when you came back for the second time?
Answer. I saw many people, totaling roughly 1,000 workers. There were many workers at the work site, at various shelters, and at the place where the rock was broken. The first time I was at the airfield, there were not many workers, but later on there were female workers as well. They were there to collect rubbish and waste.
When you went there the first time to measure the distance for the airfield, nothing had been built, is that correct? You were the first people there to start the beginning of the airfield, is that right?
បាទ
Answer: Yes, that is correct. As I stated, I was asked to accompany the engineer there, and I was one among the first group. And I was there with my members. So my role at the time was to accompany the Chinese delegation so that they could visit and observe the airfield, because as I stated earlier, I was familiar with the area or location.
And after you went there the first time, about how long did you stay at the airfield when you did the measurements?
ការវាស់វែងហើយ
Answer: After the measurement, as I stated, I was in Chansiri Barak. I stayed at that barrack, Chansiri, for a period of 3 months with Chinese expert or engineers.
And where was that? Was that at Kampong Som?
នៅកំពង់
Answer: It was in Kampong Chnang, Chansari Barak, or it was referred to the 5 stories house, which was located close to the old airfield.
And then would you go back and forth to the airfield every day to work?
បាទ
Answer: I would leave for the work site in the morning, and I would return together with the Chinese delegation during lunchtime, and we would go again in the afternoon at 2 p.m.
And that was for about 3 months, is that correct?
Answer: Yes, perhaps so. And afterwards, I was transferred to work in another place.
You said in your statement that you were transferred to collect equipment at Kampong Som. How long was that for?
Answer: I do not recall when it was. Upon our arrivals, we would come back right away on some occasions, and I do not recall how long I stayed there, or in different occasions.
And that's what I'm trying to understand. For the period that of the Khmer Rouge period, from April 75 to January 1979, about how much of your time was spent at Kampong Som receiving equipment and sending equipment to the airfield and other places? About how many trips did you make to Kampong Som during the whole period?
Answer: I could not recall the trips because I went to Kampong Som rather quite often. I was there many times, so I could not recall them all.
And is it fair to say that they were short trips? You would go down to Kampong Som, receive equipment, vehicles, material, and then go straight back to where you were working, if it was the airfield or another place.
Answer. Upon our return from Kampong Sam, I was back in the Chansari Barak in Kampong Chnang. I stayed there with the Chinese delegation, so I would go to Kampong Sam back and forth.
The Chansari building, or the place that you refer to, did you stay there the whole time that you worked at the airfield? Did you always live in those barracks and then go to the airfield each day? Or did you ever live at the airfield itself?
Answer. I stayed in Chansari Barracks at the so-called 5 stories house or building.
And is that where all of the Chinese technicians and advisors stayed? Or did they also stay in other places?
Answer. The Chinese technician stayed at the so-called 5-story building, and the cook stayed in the kitchen in the Chansari Barracks, and for Khmer workers, we stayed at Chansari Barracks.
And when you say the Khmer workers, are you meaning the people that worked at the quarry, the people that worked on the airport site, chopping wood, picking up roots? Or are you referring to the supervisors of the workers staying at Chansari Barracks?
Answer. Those who worked at the new airfield, the supervisor who led the force or work groups stayed in Chansari Barracks. And as for the newcomers, I mean the new soldiers who were brought into that field, they stayed at the airfield itself.
Thank you. Perhaps if I can summarise a little in relation to what you have testified to and what you have provided in your statement about the Chinese assistance to build the Kampong Chnang airfield. Is it fair to say that they provided vehicles, jeeps, steamrollers, other equipment, blasting equipment, technicians, advisors, rock drillers, generators, materials like steel, cement, explosives, throughout the period that the airfield was built? Did the Chinese provide that sort of assistance to build it?
Answer. Yes, these materials were from China. Steels, everything was the sort of Chinese aid. They were all from China. It was Chinese aid. And as for workers, technicians, they were all from China.
In your statement, you say that at one stage there were 120 technical advisors. Did the number go higher than that in terms of advisors from China, or did it stay about the same?
That was the number of the advisors. However, later on, some of them had been transferred to work at other locations at various provinces. And later on, I did not know whether there was any increase in the number since I was transferred to work but to cut trees outside the perimeter of the airport construction site.
Thank you, but when you went to cut trees, you took the labourers from the airfield that were living there. Is that correct?
The laborers or the forces were those men from the East Zone whom I took with me to cut trees.
And were you told why the East Zone workers, military, were sent to Kampong Chhnang airfield? Why were they selected, the military from the East Zone?
I do not know the reason. I only knew that those military workers were brought in, and some of them were assigned to me to go and cut trees. And that's all I know about them. So I was given a certain number of these military workers and some tools, and I needed to lead them to cut trees.
In your statement, you say that some of the East Zone workers told you that they were sent to Kampong Chhnang airfield for refashioning. Do you remember that?
They were brought in and they were told to come to engage in the airport construction work site, and some of them were assigned to come with me to go and cut trees, and there were many of them at the work site.
Perhaps if I can mention what you said in your statement at D166/116 0029 2823 00 English 0028 7529, that's Khmer, and French 0035 5866. And you were asked this question: what were the reasons behind the sending and assigning of people from the East Zone for the airport construction? You answered, when Levay assigned me to lead the East Zone workers to clear the forest, they told me that they affiliated to the enemies, their chiefs in the East Zone, who betrayed Angkar and the party, and those chiefs fled to Vietnam. The workers said that the Khmer Rouge sent them for refashion. Does that refresh your memory as to what the East Zone workers said to you, why they were at the airfield?
I recall part of it because we were all Khmer, and when I saw their unhappy faces, And while we were having meals in the forest, I asked them about the reasons they were sent to the work site, and they looked unhappy. And they told me about the reason I just stated, and I told them, don't have any more worry, just keep doing the work, and we would eat whatever we could afford. And I told them that for the rice and food supply, there should be sufficient for us. And they said half of the force which were originally sent from the zone disappeared, and mainly they were their supervisors or chief, and only the ordinary soldiers arrived. And that's how I learned about the reason that they were sent.
We don't have a lot of time to cover a long period, so let me put a statement that you gave to the investigators about the conditions at the work site for the workers and about arrests that occurred at the work site. And then I'll ask you some questions about that. I'm referring to D166/116, English 0029-2824, Khmer 0028-7528 and 9, and French 0035-5865/5. This was the question that you were asked. Most of the witnesses we interviewed said that many people were sick, died, and taken for killing. And they said that they saw people being tied and trucked away when they worked at the construction site. Please explain your accounts. And you answered, those were the true stories. The arrests were made and the people were being tied every day. I personally witnessed those events. When a list of names of workers was forwarded, one person came to the construction site to tell the victims that they have to go to a meeting. Then the victims were arrested, tied and transported to the direction of Phnom Penh. There were at least 3 victims in each arrest, and the arrests occurred every day. As far as I know, the persons who made an arrest were not from the construction site, and those orders were not made by Levi or Song. The number of deaths from overwork, exhaustion, hard work also increased from one day to another, as they could not endure the hardest work. The workers committed suicide by running into the roller every week. Most of the suicide victims were female. I did not see any people being killed at the construction site. The corpses of those who died at the construction site were taken to be buried in the forest near Wat Stung. That is what you have told the investigators as to what was happening to workers at the airfield. Can you comment on that? Is that a true account?
I personally saw people being tracked away, and usually they were tracked away at night time, and I heard the sound of the activity from where I stayed, and mostly they were transported to Phnom Penh, and the people who went to take them to Phnom Penh were those from Phnom Penh. And it was an ongoing activity at the time, and everyone was minding his or her own business.
And why were they being taken away?
I do not know the real reason. What I saw was those trucks leaving Phnom Penh to go to the airport work site to get those people. And the people at the work sites themselves were not the one who took them or tracked them out to Phnom Penh.
You were taken away for a time. You were arrested. Isn't that correct?
I was arrested after I returned from cutting trees. I returned in order to come and get food supply, that is rice. And Jane, who saw me transporting some large amount of rice because I had men to feed. And he accused me of transporting rice to the enemy, and I said, if you consider my men were the enemy, I myself would be the enemy as well. Then I went to collect some medicines, and next day I was told I had to attend a meeting, and they told me that there was no need for me to get into a vehicle of my team, and that I should get into their vehicle. And I was taken to a hospital, and that hospital still exists today. I was detained, and my hands were tied behind my back, and I was tossed onto a truck and transported away. Those people who made the arrest, that is, who arrested me, were not the ones on the ground at the airport. They were people from Phnom Penh. After they kicked my ankle to make me fall down, I fell down, but I had a glance at them, and I knew that they were not the people at the work site, but they were people from Phnom Penh. And on the tracks, I could hear sounds of others people, so I presume they had been arrested before I was arrested, and we were all tracked away on that vehicle.
You mentioned in your statement that people came with lists of names and called people out, and they were taken away. Did you see that occurring? Did you see those names being called out and workers being taken away?
Before I had been arrested, yes, I did see it. And if we said that we knew the people whose names were on the list, then they would go to take those people away. And sometimes we told the names of the people we knew when we asked, and later in the evening they disappeared. And that included both people who were transferred from the East Zone and some local people as well.
And why did staff, supervisors from Kampong Chhnang Airfield, why did they allow these people coming in from outside to take their workers away. Why did they allow that to happen?
President, witness, please hold on, and Councillor Coppert, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I let it pass a few times already, partly also because the witness used this word himself. However, I think it is it would have preference to refer to the people from the East Zone as soldiers, soldiers who had just rebelled, were involved in massive fighting, and to continuously refer to them as workers as if they were normal civilians is, I think, not accurate, and only under certain circumstances the word workers would make sense. But in this specific case, I object to the use of the word workers. They were soldiers, they were military people sent from the East Zone after a rebellion.
It's a very nice submission on the defence case. Your Honours, they were soldiers. It's clear they were soldiers, but then they came to work. This is very nuanced. Soldiers. Witness, did the East Zone soldiers that were sent to the work site, did they have weapons with them? Did they have guns?
No, they did not. When they were transported in, they did not bring along with any weapon, as their weapons were confiscated. Although they came from various units from the same zone, but none of them had any weapon with them, and the only thing they had with them was clothes.
And for the East Zone soldiers, do you know why their weapons were confiscated?
I only knew part of the event. I was told by those workers with me in the forest that they were accused of having a connection to the enemies. But as I said, I was simply an ordinary worker, and I didn't know the real details behind that. And the only reason that I learned was from those workers while we were cutting trees in the forest. And at a quiet time, I asked them about this, and that's what I was told.
Thank you. I would like to talk a bit about some of these arrests. And you said that you heard that you saw that these arrests were occurring, and that trucks were taking people away. In your statement, or in a crime site report, and I'm referring to D232/100 English 0043 6946 and Khmer 0042 8465 and English 0048 5452. I think there's an objection.
No objection, just a request to not refer to D documents numbers, but to the E3. That would be much more practical for us to find it quickly.
We will do that, to be honest. I don't have the E number right now, but I will obtain it for you. This is what the investigator said. This is what the investigator said that you said to him when you took him to the airfield in 2010. He said that you pointed out a site to the northwest of Kampong Chhnang airfield, about 180 metres from the location where you formerly lived during the Democratic Kampuchea period, and about 3 kilometres from the airfield's runway. A large tree is at that site. In 1977, he saw trucks carrying troops leave the airfield at night between 10 p.m. and midnight. The troops were brought to that site, and about 5 minutes later, you heard screams and crying emanating from that location. Several days later, you smelt the odour of decomposing bodies coming from that site. The witness still recognises that tree today, which is now in its original state. At that site, the investigator was unable to see the signs of grave pits, but he is suspicious about circular marks at 2 or 3 locations near the tree. If I can put one of those photos that were in that crime site report on the screen, I'll ask you a few questions about that. Just for our technician, that's slide 1. But whilst this is happening, you said that you lived in, I think, Chansari in Kampong Chhnang town whilst you were working at the airfield, and then you would travel there every day. And then from what the investigator has said, that you have said, is that you used to live in a building that was called the Transportation Unit, which was about 3 kilometres to the west of the airfield. Can you explain, did you live in 2 places, one at the Transportation Unit and the other in town, in Kampong Chhnang town, with the Chinese?
It happened only after I went to transport goods, and while I was undertaking the terrain measurement, I stayed at the Chansari barrack. And only later on, when I transported goods to the sawmill, I stayed at that building you mentioned. And about 300 to 400 meters behind where I stayed, there was a stream located near Wat Steng Pagoda, and there was a big tree there. I heard the screams coming from that direction, and later on, when I trespassing the area, I noticed the odor coming from that area. However, I did not see corpses. I only smelled the odor, and that big tree still exists. And I also accompanied the OCIJ investigator to that site, but we only saw the big tree and some bamboo trees, but we did not see any pits.
If we can look at D322/100, ERN 00436952, Khmer 00428469, and French 455, 457, at picture 4 on the screen. Can you just explain what you see in that picture?
The photo shows the area behind the location where I transported the wood.
And if we can look at the second slide, please. And that's ERN 0043 6952 in the English. Can you explain what you are doing in this photograph, what you are pointing to?
I am pointing to the big tree at the far distance. You can see that there is only one big tree at the background of the photo.
And if we can show the next slide, please, 0043 6951. It's English, it's the photo. And, Mr. President, I would ask that the photos stay on the screen if possible, because it's been flashing up and then flashing off.
President, yes, your request is granted.
Looking at this slide, what are you showing us in this photo?
This is the area where I heard the screams.
And if we can show the last slide, which is English 0043 6951. If you can tell us what you see in this photo that will come up shortly.
Near the big tree on the day that I accompanied the investigator, we saw the circular marks, which could be the marks of the former pits from that regime. And as I said, this is the area where I heard the screams emanating from, and where I smelled the bad odor. And the screams from this area, I heard it almost every night while I was staying in the area. However, the location is an open field now, but the big tree still stands, and there's still some bamboo trees along the stream.
You said that you heard it almost every night. How often did you stay in the transportation unit in that building we've just seen?
On the day that I returned to sleep there, I heard the screams. But allow me to say that I did not sleep at that transportation unit every night. I only slept when I could not make a return trip. So after I dropped the routes off, I would return. But for some days, it was too late, so I stayed overnight. And that's when I heard screams coming from this area.
And can you give us an amount about how many times you heard these incidents occurring in the evening?
It varied, and I cannot record it all, as you know, it's been several years. And the situation at that time was rather confusing as well. And I myself had to be mindful of where I was going. And I could not tell you the number of different screams coming from this area when I heard it.
Thank you. Mr. President, I have about 2 or 3 more minutes on this topic. I believe you normally break at 11:30. I'll continue. Thank you. You said that you heard the screaming. For about how long would you hear the screaming? Was it quick? Was it 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Can you tell us how long it was?
The screaming lasted for about 3 or 4 minutes, and sometimes it was shorter than that, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Then I could hear the sound of the truck returning.
In this report it says that you told the investigator that you would see the trucks carrying troops come towards that location. Where would you see those trucks come from?
The trucks came from the other side of the mountain, while I was on the opposite side of the mountain. I heard the sounds of the trucks, and I heard the sound of it turning at the corner. And of course, the area that I stayed in was closer to the area that I heard the screaming emanating from.
And was the airfield between the transportation unit and the mountain you referred to?
The transportation unit was in between the mountain. When I worked while I was cutting trees, I was at the other side of the mountain, and the distance was about 3 to 4 kilometers.
How did all of this screaming, trucks arriving, the smelling of decomposing bodies, experiencing that on a regular basis, how did that make you feel?
President, witness, please wait, and Defense Counsel, Antakushe, you have the floor.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, or in any case in the translation, I did not hear the witness speak about smells of decomposing bodies. He just spoke about smells. So I believe that the co-prosecutor here is adding extra elements, so I'm objecting.
Your Honour, it may be a translation issue, but it's certainly not something that I'm adding. As you know from the report, it says he smelled the odour of decomposing corpses coming from that site. But to clarify, can I ask you that again? I've read this passage out to you. You've said to the investigator that you smelt odour of decomposing bodies. Is that what you smelt or not?
Yes, that's what I told the investigator, because when the wind was blowing to my direction, that was the stench or the strong odor that I smelled.
So, Mr. President, if I just finish that last question, how did the smells, the screaming, the trucks arriving every night that you were there, how did that make you feel?
During the night that I stayed there, I heard the screaming, and personally, at the time, I did not feel any good. I did not know which day my turn would come. That's how I felt at the time. Because from what I saw, workers there were asking themselves when our day would come. That is the day that we would be killed or died. We were just waiting for the day. That's the bad feeling that we had. Despite the food that we were given, we did not have the happy feeling at all.
Thank you, Mr. President.
President, thank you. It is now appropriate for our noon break. We take a break now and resumed at 1:30 to continue our proceedings. Court officer, please assist the witness at the waiting room for witnesses and experts during the lunch break, and invite him to the courtroom again at 1:30 this afternoon. Security personnel, you are instructed to take Kirsten Pone back to the waiting room downstairs and have him returned to attend the proceedings this afternoon before 1:30. The court is now in recess.
សូមចេញក្រោកឈរ